Here's a country store at Hart Square, built by Joshua B. Little and his wife Susan about 1790. It came from, and Gerald Bolick actually have the land deeds from, and the purchase of this house, which this was actually a house in 1885. It was purchased from Joe Pearlie Hefner in 1981 and moved here in 1981. Interesting story about this cabin is when I needed a few logs, extra logs, and a young friend of mine who helped me back then, Paul Hedrick, told me about this particular building. And when I got here, rather than a few logs, I noticed it was totally salvageable. So my wife and I went on one Saturday evening to look at it and talk about buying it. And when he actually was not there, his wife was on the front porch, and I usually deal with the men, and when I asked to speak to him, he was in an outhouse some 20, 30 yards off. He comes out, pulls the suspenders up, and asked me what I wanted, and I told him I was interested in buying this particular building. His wife jumped up from a rocking chair and said, "You can't sell that, Uncle so-and-so is coming to live in it." And he turned to his wife and said, "Uncle so-and-so is almost 90. He said, woman, you can set yourself down, and I'm going to sell it today or I'll burn it to the ground tonight." Well, he said a few more unusual words, but anyway, he asked me what I would give him for it. I said, "I'll give you $300. He said, "No." He said, "I'll tell you what." And I wasn't even going to take the 10 back then. He said, "If you'll leave the 10, you can have it for $250. Well, I went home that night, and my wife Becky said, "You better move that thing tomorrow," because he embarrassed both of us in front of us, embarrassed him, and she may talk him into not letting you have that building tomorrow. So I called Paul and his brother Claude up, and I said, "Hey guys, we need to move that building tomorrow," which was Sunday. They never worked on Sunday. I said, "I'll give you double the amount that you," and back then I paid them $3 an hour. So I'll give you $6 an hour to help me move it. Finally, I persuaded them into moving it. The entire building, including the chimney, was sitting on this runway right here by the middle of the afternoon the next day. I went back and they gave me the deeds a week or two later of the 1790. I actually have the deeds for this particular house when it was built. You know, the inside has country bacon and country hams. The hams are almost 30 years old. The bacon's probably 25. As a physician, I take care of Shuford Mills and Century. All these companies for Christmas would give me a country ham. This has been 30 years ago. And I'd eat one, and I'd put several of them smokehouse, a couple of them in here, and every year I go and spray them with Raid. The same with the bacon. So don't eat it. I wouldn't recommend eating it. Inside you'll also see a spool cabinet. It's interesting. I was flying just across the hill here and spotted several log buildings, and the Miss Hefner back then wouldn't sell them. She was saving them for her son, who was a radiologist, I think, in Wilmington. A year later, I flew again. The roof was bad on several of them, so I just took the guy that lived here. We took some old pieces of tin and you spent maybe 3 or 4 hours fixing the roof. And she came out and she said, "Let me pay you." I said, "No, you don't need to pay me." I said, "I want them to be salvageable." So she went upstairs and brought the spool cabinet here that was in her grandfather's country store there in Newton, and gave that to me. And she said, "You know, he really wouldn't want that old pigsty we've got over there. And I've got bad memories about feeding those pigs 2 or 3 times a day. And why don't you take it too?" So, you know, I'd rather have that pigsty than the other building. I had barns and houses, but a log pigsty, that was something I didn't have. So the moral of the story is always be nice and smile, and anytime you can help somebody, feel free to help them. You know, when we got ready to move this building, you know, for $300, the chimney was worth that. This is hand-carved soapstone, which is real unusual, one of the types of chimneys. And it's one of the type of chimneys I didn't have. You know, we've got sandstone, soapstone, fieldstone, you know, the different types of field rock what they would have used when they were building these cabins in the 1800s. So, when you do enter here, don't forget there's a ladder hanging on the wall as you come in the back door that carries you upstairs for storage. And above, in the upper level, you'll see children's caskets, adult caskets, stoves, all kind of stuff that was for extra storage and supply for the country store that needed to be tucked away until it could be used. It really doesn't take you long to run out of money when you're shopping for early store pieces. Unlike most cabins, they would have had 2, 3, 4 of the same item, and it's hard to find that many different items. And so frequently I run out of money in the first several hours when my friends say, I didn't see anything. Well, you're shopping for this variety of things and this many of a unique type, 1, 2, 3, 4 of the same item. It gets very expensive. I'm lucky. I started early when you could buy things very reasonably. Today you can hold it in your hand and it's $100. Rastus sits in the corner with his shotgun. He guards the store 24 hours a day. Rastus was just a mannequin that I liked for one of my pickers brought here one day to selling other things with it. And I thought it was very appropriate to put him in the store. Yeah. Inside you'll see an early ledger book. Remember, farmers didn't have a lot of money until their crops came in. So he'd keep a list of how much you owed him through the spring until his crops came in the fall, and then they would pay him for whatever they had accumulated during that time. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Paul, and welcome to the Country Store here at Hart Square. First, let me tell you a little bit about the building. It was built in 1790. Now, 1790, who was president back then? Can you guess? George Washington. That's right. That is so old, when you touch one of these walls over here, these logs that this log cabin is made out of, that was during a period when George Washington was president. That's how old it was. Now, some of the things that we have in the store that might be of interest to you are things like right in front of me, this country ham that was hanging here. We here in the Country Store, we sold all of these pots and pans, ironworks. We sold canned goods. We sold fresh produce, but we also sold some dried things like beans and some salt and flour and things like that. We also had, for the men, we had some chewing tobacco. We had some very great chewing tobacco. For example, we had rope tobacco, we had twisted tobacco, we had straight tobacco, we had canned tobacco, anything that the gentleman wanted. For the ladies, we had things like textiles, threads, and needles, some fancy textiles that they couldn't make themselves. And the needles, certainly they couldn't get, so they would come here. This was the store for the region, not only for the town, but for the region. Now, we also had some security for this store. When I would leave the store to help a customer to load up their wagon or something with some of the things that they purchased, I would be out of the store, so I had to have some security. Now, I kept my cash here and I kept my gun right here. So I'd take my gun with me outside, and then in my cash here, if somebody opened my drawer, if they know the combination, it does have a combination, it would ring. And I would come and run it with my gun. Some of the unusual things that we have here that you might not be familiar with, some of our senior citizens might. One is like the leather breeches hanging up there. These are dried string beans that we'll keep through the winter, and they're called leather breeches. I will tell you too that we have some unusual harness. Over in the corner we have a harness that would fit on a horse or mule, but it has strings hanging down from it. As the horse would either shake or walk, those strings, leather strings, would shake and shoo the flies away. It's called a shoo fly harness. In trading in the Country Store here, we did a lot of bartering. Bartering is trading. So what I would do was every time somebody brought something in and made a purchase, I would write it right here in my ledger. Write their name and the amount, what they owed me.
Hi, I'm Jim Goodwin. Now, on this part of the Country Store, I function as almost like a grain store or a general store. And one other thing it did function is the post office for the area. You'll see on this side also the fireplace, for instance, was this was actually all these stones were lettered and numbered and put back in the same order in which they were taken down from the original site, just north of Conover here. And they had, so it's very interesting when you're talking about somebody in the artistry and the workmanship it took to build the same fireplace in a different location using the same rocks. They have also in the area, it's this area, this right here was a nail. Actually, it has all numbered in here, and you'll find some old replicas of the nails that were used in here. Up in this area is where the shot was kept for hunting, and you'll see the different sizes up in here, up in the racks up there, as well as the powder kegs up here. This, as you see right here, is a checkerboard, and this is this place was kind of a meet and greet, so to speak. People came from all over. They had to walk. They had to either take wagons or horses, and they would. This was like a go-to place.
In summary, this country store sold everything that the town needed. This was the only place where they could get most of the things that I have. So, next time you're around, stop in to see me. Maybe I'll sell you something, maybe I'll trade you something, and when I do, I'll write it down.